Hello, my name is Lucine Pashikian, and this is my Lucy chart presentation on vulnerable populations. In this presentation, I will be discussing different factors that place different social groups at risk for health problems. I'm going to address 8 vulnerabilities, including homelessness, poverty, mental illness, life in rural settings, migration and migrant health problems, infectious disease, addiction, including alcohol drug abuse, and violence. Vulnerable populations are defined as a group of people who are at greater risk for poverty and have poor health status and health care need access. Vulnerable populations are characterized by their disease such as HIV, TB, etc., age group, demographics such as homelessness, homeless people, etc. Homelessness, the first one. According to National Health Care for the Homeless, a homeless individual is an individual who lacks housing, permanent residence, shelter, and who may be living on the streets. They also lack adequate food. The homeless population is a social group that is vulnerable because the homeless are at increased risk for adverse health-related outcomes. Homelessness is directly related to poverty, infectious disease, addiction, alcohol and drug abuse, and violence. And I think I mentioned infectious disease. Poverty. Poverty is defined as insufficient financial resources, lack of housing, lack of shelter, lack of adequate food, lack of health care. Poverty can lead to poor medical care, which can lead to increased disease. Poverty is also related to higher incidence of disease and disability, increased mortality rate, higher rates of pain and suffering. Here, poverty. Mental illness is next. According to the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, 20 to 25% of the homeless population in the United States suffer from some form of severe mental illness. Also, for many homeless people, substance abuse co-occurs with mental illness. Often people with untreated mental illness use street drugs. They have careless lifestyle, risky behaviors, and again, drug and alcohol use. Next is infectious disease. Poor medical care, poor hygiene, unhealthy and cramping living conditions can all lead to increased disease. Incidence of infectious disease is higher in homeless people than in general population. Next, I have addiction, alcohol and drug abuse. According to Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, approximately 38% of homeless people are dependent on alcohol, and 26% use some kind of a drug. This is the statistics. And next, I have violence. Many homeless people are victims of violence. According to a study published in National Healthcare for Homeless Council, the rate of violence victimization in a national sample of people experiencing homelessness was 49% versus 2% in general public. According to a study conducted by Fisher and Roget, homeless people with both substance disorders and mental illness are increased risk for violence and victimization. A recent report published by the National Coalition for the Homeless finds that many people experiencing homelessness have been the victim of violence committed for the sole reason that they are unhoused. They are homeless. Okay, next I have life in rural settings. inadequate access to clinics and providers. This is related to poverty, poor health, poor mobility, unmet care needs. People who live in rural settings, they have few social contacts, and they experience significant health disparities, which is again in turn is related to higher incidence of disease and disability and higher incidence of mortality rates. Last one, I have migrant health. According to World Health Organization, health problems among migrants are high. The most frequent health problems include accidental injuries, burns, gastrointestinal illnesses, cardiovascular events, pregnancy and delivery related complications, diabetes, hypertension, etc. Also, they have insufficient access to resources and lack of community support. Migrants are more likely to be under immunized, which puts them in an increased risk for vaccine preventable disease. This is according to World Health Organization. And these are my references. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you. Have a nice day.